No, seriously, if the business has to commence.
Okay.
So I take it you're moving the bill, are you, Deputy?
I am indeed.
Thank you very much.
So, last week, Threshold published their annual report 2017. The report revealed that 32% of the 75,000 calls Threshold received last year were about eviction notices. The previous year, 2016, eviction notices were responsible for just 14% of calls to Threshold. Calls about eviction notices had more than doubled in the space of 1 year. Threshold say, in Ireland, as indeed in Europe generally, the private rented sector is the leading source of homelessness through evictions, both legal and illegal. According to Focus Ireland, 69% of homeless people report that their last stable home was in the private rental sector. It is sheer insanity, in the middle of the greatest housing crisis in the history of the estate, to allow the flow of evictions from the private rental sector to continue without a serious attempt to staunch the flow. This bill represents a serious attempt to staunch the flow. Now, the same Threshold report reveals that the most common type of eviction notice is an eviction notice which references sale of property as grounds for eviction. The report also reveals that there has been a major rise of eviction notices reported to Threshold in 2017, which reference renovation of property as grounds for eviction, so-called renovictions. Half of all eviction notices dealt with by Threshold in 2017 were either on the grounds of renoviction or on the grounds of sale of property. If this bill were passed, it would block, stop, prevent all of these evictions. Earlier today at Leaders' Questions, the Taoiseach said that the bill we are discussing tonight is too extreme. But a ban on sale of property as grounds for eviction is not uncommon in continental Europe. It is legal in Germany, it is legal in Sweden, it is legal in Denmark, it's legal also in the Netherlands. By the way, I don't see all the landlords doing a runner out of Sweden and the Netherlands because a ban on evictions on grounds of sale of property is the law of the land. There's a lot of scaremongering, I think, around that issue. So it's not these governments which are extreme on this issue. It's actually the government that the Minister is part of, the government the Taoiseach presides over, which is extreme in continuing to allow evictions continue at this rate at a time of record homelessness. Now, last night I visited tenants at number 539 North Circular Road. As explained by my colleague, Deputy Paul Murphy, at Leaders' Questions this afternoon, tenants in this 16-apartment building were issued with notices to quit in the end of October and face actual eviction now at the start of January. The landlord, a Mr. James Anderson, has been a director or shareholder of no less than 7 current or former companies with share capital of up to €1 million in one case.
It's inappropriate to name someone not in the House, not in a position to defend themselves. I'm not aware if this person has been named in the media. If he has, that's one matter. But sorry,
it's just a factual thing. It's not actually.
Well, you're not naming him to praise him.
I visited the property myself last night, Count Corlett, to see this with my own eyes. This landlord is trying to evict families with children at Christmas time by way of renoviction. So, Minister, I ask the question, who is extreme? The parties in the Dáil who would ban this practice, or the parties in the Dáil who allow this to happen under the law of the land? I will now list some of the key changes provided for in this bill and make some brief comments about some of them, other than the two changes I've already spoken of to date. So this bill would, number one, ban sale of property as grounds for eviction. 2, ban renovation as grounds for eviction. 3, in the case of a landlord wishing to evict to move a family member into the property, the bill would require the landlord to compensate the tenant by way of 6 months' back rent. The bill unambiguously extends tenant rights to students and affords full tenant rights to students under the law. Number 5, in the event of a bank or receiver taking over a property with a tenant in situ, the bank or receiver shall have full landlord responsibilities and the tenant will maintain full tenant rights. Number 6, the bill affords tenants full tenant rights after 2 months as opposed to 6 months as is currently the case. And number 7, the bill would remove the danger zone for tenants, which allows evictions when a tenancy expires by rolling over Part 4 tenancies into a new tenancy arrangement. Some brief comments on them. On the family member issue, I'll note the fact that 52% of such cases appealed to the RTB last year were found to be invalid. This clause is an attempt to weed out bogus, illegal evictions of this kind. On the issue of the provision for banks and receivers, this will be of particular interest to tenants in the 12,732 buy-to-lets identified by the Central Bank as being in long-term arrears 2 years or more. And on the issue of students being accorded tenant rights, this will apply to both private and publicly owned student accommodation and end the situation whereby public authorities such as state-funded universities have been excluded by the Act. Now, the Taoiseach took issue earlier today with Solidarity's call for landlords to recuse themselves from a vote on this issue. 15 Fianna Fáil TDs are declared landlords, 14 Fine Gael TDs are declared landlords, 4 cabinet members are declared landlords, 5 junior ministers are declared landlords. In society, 5% of the population are landlords. The proportion of landlords in this Dáil is far, far greater, particularly within the ranks of the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael parties. The Taoiseach said that those deputies would not be guided in how they vote by their own vested interests. I'm not going to make any comment on that. I do believe that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael's commitment to the capitalist market is probably a greater factor here than the individual property interests of their TDs. But I will say this. 2 years ago, in January of 2017, the Dáil voted on Solidarity's Anti-Eviction Bill 216. The vote was tied. I think it was 51 to 51. The bill was then defeated on the casting vote of the Ceann Comhairle. It is a fact that if landlord TDs had recused themselves from that vote, the bill would have passed second stage. It is also a fact that if the bill had passed all 5 stages in 2017, that a large number of the evictions carried out in the interim would have been illegal. Most of them would have been prevented, and homelessness would be a lot lower than it is today. And so we make no apology and we repeat our call. Landlord TDs should not vote on this bill on Thursday. Now, the Taoiseach told the Late Late Show that the housing crisis keeps him awake at night. And the government tell us that they plan to bring forward their own legislation on these issues. They will introduce a rent register, they will extend eviction notice periods, they will provide a legal definition on substantial refurbishment, they'll give increased powers to the RTB. I welcome any change the government makes which improves the lot of tenants by one iota, whether it be under pressure from the emerging housing protest movement or under pressure from public opinion. But let's be clear, these changes do not ban evictions, the government's changes do not strike at the heart and root of evictions, and they won't stop too many of them either. If you really want to stop evictions, you will vote to ban evictions. If you really want to stop evictions, you really have to vote for this bill.
Now, who's